Good morning. All right, we're ready to start a new week in our reading lesson. And what we're going to do today is we're going to finish reading the story that we had started last week called John Noir's Bridge. Remember about the sea dragon. So let's go ahead and look at these words because these are some of the words we're going to run across. Just want you to know what they are. And also, this is just FYI, I have my window open while I'm recording this and my roosters are crowing. So if you hear a rooster, it's not part of the story. It's in my yard. Okay, this sentence. Sturdy straps or martingales prevented the horse from throwing back its head. So I'm assuming that's some sort of what I would have called when I used to ride horses there's a word for it, but I'm not sure if that's what I called it. But it's strapped to the horse's bridle, I believe, all the way down to right around its chest area, something underneath it that straps to the saddle, and it keeps their head from throwing their head about. The knights carefully put the swords back into their scabbards. That's where if you wear a sword, you know, you've seen a soldier or something pull the sword out of a thing and then put it back. That the thing that it's in is a scabbard. That's where, like, you'd keep a knife even. They looked at the magnificent animal in awe, amazed by its size and beauty. Awe, that would be when you look at something in awe, that means you're looking at it like, whoa, like your mouth would just fly open and you're just standing there like, oh, you just don't know what to say. He clambered up the steep hill. Clambered is kind of a like you're going up some stairs or up a hill and you're doing it kind of awkwardly and it's hard for you to get up. So that's what clambered means, kind of climbing up in an awkward way. All right, so let's look in our reader on page 148. This is the last section of the story. It's called Trapped. Now, if you'll remember, in the last part of the story, in the first part of the story, we learned that Prince John Noir is the youngest of the prince's children. There's 4 of them. He has 2 brothers and a sister. And Prince John Noir is blind. And we learned that he has a sea dragon friend that stays in the river. So in the second part, we learned that they were under siege. The bad guys were coming, and they didn't know what to do. The bad king wanted the sister's hand in marriage, and her dad said no. She said no, so they were going to fight. And that's when John Noir says, hey, I know of a secret bridge. Well, we know what that secret bridge was. It was Danzee. All right, and so at the end of last week when we were reading, the sea dragon had just brought its head up out of the water. So let's look then on page 148 as we begin to read. Remember, you have to read along with me, just like you're reading, okay? Now, as we read, I want you to see how Danzee is helping with the invasion of the Southern King's army, and if John Noir is ever going to feel like a real prince, okay? Let's go ahead and read. Danzee, this is my father, the king, and my sister, Princess Gimla. We need your help. John Noir heard Danzee gurgle. Can you stretch from one bank to the other? Danzee swirled himself around. He arched himself in several dozen places and made the water toss out beside him for yards and yards. Then, from far across the river, a slap of his tail sounded. He's ready, said John Noir. Gimla, still holding her brother's arm, hesitated. It's all right, the prince said. Danzee will help us. I would go with you, but I must wait here for the invaders. At last Gimla stepped forward, and at the king's command 4 guards took her across the dragon bridge to the other side. Is he beautiful? John Noir asked his father as Gimla was crossing. Worthy of a prince, said the king. John Noir said nothing. Thank you, Danzee, said the king. And Danzee dropped beneath the surface, flashed the tip of his tail once, and was gone. After some hours, John Noir could hear hoofbeats and trumpets and shouts. Can you see them yet? Not yet, said King Rolday. If my plan fails, the prince began, never doubt your plan once it's underway. Choose the best plan and stay with it. A king must believe in himself if he would have his men's trust. Januar remained silent. At length the king said, they are here. The whole pass between the ridges was suddenly filled with riders on huge battle horses. The armor and swords shone out in the setting sun. On and on they came, leather creaking and metal clinking. The horses tossed their heads, rattling their martingales and chest plates. They drew up before King Rolde and Prince Januar. The southern king leaned forward in his saddle, throwing back his black hood. Where's your feeble army, Rolde? All along the ridges above and in the pass, Rolde's soldiers appeared silently, gray and solemn against the dusk. King Rolde pointed. The southern king looked back and started. His men tensed in their saddles and put their hands to their scabbards. The southern king swung back around. A stupid trap! You do not have me, I have you! And with that he sprang from his horse and drew a dagger against Rolde's throat. He leaned toward Rolde's ear. Call them down, or I kill you. Januar whistled high and long and loud. Just behind them the river burst open with a great rush and a horrible roar. The silver horn gleamed as the water streamed off the giant creature. Danzi saw the armies and raised himself 100 feet out of the water, shaking his head and screaming. The southern king staggered back. Help us, Danzi, Januar called. The great head swooped down. Danzi caught up the evil king by his tunic and held him there. Your men surrender, or I give you to my friend here for his supper. The two armies stood frozen in horror and awe, but the southern king refused to speak. Round about, called out Januar. Danzi took the southern king in 4 giant circles, skimming the water with him on the downward moves, raking him through the Wadelia on the upward. Enough, the king called. We surrender! Well done, Danzi. Drop him, called the prince. In mid-arch, Danzi opened his jaws, and the king flew out and down into the water. As he clambered about in the water, Tayton and the counselors came forward through the invading armies. The southern king dragged himself onto the bank. Shall we discuss the terms of surrender? Said Rolde to the dripping king. Bandine, overcome with the wonder of it all, ran forward to his master. Well done, Januar. Prince Januar, said King Rolde. Januar smiled broadly and straightened his tunic once. All right. That was a great story. That would be cool if they'd make it into a movie, wouldn't it? That would be really good. All right, let's go back to the first page of this section. Let me ask you a few questions to make sure you understood the story real well. So how does Januar know Danzi has stretched himself across the river? What did Danzi do to let him know that he was done stretching himself? He uses his tail to tap the water. Why do you think Gimli hesitates to walk across the river on the sea dragon? Would you have hesitated? I probably would have. Look there on page 148, and let's find the very last paragraph where it says it's all right. This is where I want you to read this out loud. This is where Gimli was kind of hesitant to walk across the dragon, and this is where her brother, Januar, reassures her. So read that last paragraph out loud as though you were Januar. All right, look at the next page on 149. How do we know that Gimli trusts her brother Januar? She goes on across the dragon, doesn't she? Why do you think Januar asked his father if Danzi is beautiful? He's blind and he can't really see him, but he's probably got a picture of him in his mind of maybe kind of what he might look like, but he wants to make sure that everybody else thinks that he's beautiful. Now, why doesn't Januar say anything after his father's answer? Because remember when he asked him if he was beautiful and the king said, worthy of a prince? And then it says Januar said nothing. Why do you think he didn't say anything? He doesn't think of himself as a prince, does he? Because he's blind. Look at the next page, on page 150. How much time has passed before hoofbeats and trumpets were heard? Look at the very first sentence on page 150. After some hours, so it's been several hours that she's gone across. So is John Noir beginning to doubt his plan? How do you know? Because he starts to say, if my plan fails, remember? Now, you see the next paragraph where it starts with never doubt? Now, that's the king that's reassuring John Noir about not doubting his plan. I want you to read that paragraph from never doubt all the way down to men's trust. You read that like you're the king telling John Noir that. All right. What does John Noir's father encourage him to do? To believe in himself, and to gain the soldiers' trust. So why does it feel good to John Noir to stand by his father while they wait? He feels good about standing there because he feels like, hey, this is my plan and it's working. And my father's watching me work. He feels proud, I think, but not in a bad way. How does the Southern King feel about himself and his army? He thinks they're all that, doesn't he? He comes up like, heh heh. So find the spot on page 150, and I want you to read out loud as though you are the Southern King and you think you and your army are all that. So let's see. It's going to be on the right-hand side on page 150. The first paragraph on the right-hand side, it says the Southern King. Okay, where it says he leaned forward in his saddle, throwing back his black hood. Now, say that sentence like you think he said it. Where's your feeble army, Rolday? Something like that. Don't you think that's how he said it? He's pretty confident, isn't he? Look at page 151, where the dragon has him by the tunic. Why does the Southern King say, you do not have me, I have you? He still thinks he's all that, doesn't he? And he just wants to think that he's got him no matter what. Who takes action now? And what does he do? John Noir. And he whistles for Danzy's help. Do you think the Southern King was surprised to be hanging from the mouth of a sea dragon? Well, I mean, yes and no, probably. I mean, we don't really know if, this is a fanciful story, so we don't know in the story if they're used to sea dragons or not. Look at page 152. Why would the Southern King refuse to speak after hearing John Noir's words? He was a proud man in a bad way, right? So he was too proud to surrender. Why is John Noir's next command to Danzy a smart decision when he tells him to roundabout? He's scaring the Southern King, trying to make a believer out of him, I guess you might say. How do King Rolday and the whole kingdom feel about Prince John Noir now? They're proud of him. They look up to him now. That's exactly right. So how do we know that they really respect him now? There's something that the author uses to let us know that he really does hold respect now. Look at on the page 152, right up from the bottom, where it says, Prince John Noir, said King Rolday. The king said, Prince Rolday. He called him a prince. So he can know that he has made it, to prince, I guess you might say. All right, let's look at page 63 and 64 in your work text. Now, page 63 is optional. Page 64 is not. However, I'm going to make them to where you choose which page you can do. You can either do page 63 or page 64. Either way, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to give you a grade on those pages. They're both going to be worth probably 10 points. And I'm going to write this down so I don't forget. Choose page 63 or 64 for 10 points. So you choose. You do not have to do both unless you just want to, but you need to choose one of those pages to do, okay? All right, that's all for today.